Alright, so the bottom of the things I know or things I should know graph. Again, this is the graph of f prime, not the graph of f. And that's one of the biggest mistakes people make, is they look at the graph and they think, oh, that's the graph of f, so I'll answer all the questions like that's the graph of f. It's the graph of f prime, so be careful. Question A. For what values of x does f have a relative maximum? Well, forget the graph. Let's just think a relative maximum happens when f prime, let's answer the y first, I guess. When f prime changes, for maximum, f prime changes positive to negative. Okay, so I do not want the relative maximums of this graph. Right? That's not what it asked for. It doesn't say the relative maximums of f prime. It wants the relative maximums of f. That happens when f prime changes from positive to negative. When f prime, which is this graph, so when this graph changes from positive to negative, so what value of x does that happen at? Where does that graph change from positive to negative? I heard one right answer in there. At negative 2, right, the graph is positive over here and negative over here. So that means there's a relative max of f at x equals negative 2. That's really confusing the first few times you do this, because your brain reads relative maximum and your mind thinks, okay, that's the top of a hill, so how about x equals 1? Well, f prime has a max at 1, but that's not what it's asking. I want to know where f prime changes from positive to negative, and that only happens at negative 2. It changes the other direction at 4. Oops, I think I just gave away the next answer. For what value of x does f have a relative minimum? And why? Well, the y is when f prime changes for minimum negative to positive. Well, f prime changes negative to positive. Read the graph left to right. Positive to negative, and then it stays negative. Gets to 0, but stays negative, and then at x equals 4, it changes from negative to positive. So that means the graph of f has a minimum right there. Part C. On what intervals is the graph of f concave upward? Use f prime to justify your answer. So it's trying to give me a hint here. We said concave upward was where f prime is doing what? F prime is the slopes. If I have a concave up graph, what is f prime doing? Increasing. So I want to look at my graph and see where is f prime increasing. So as I move left to right, f prime is increasing from negative 1 to 1. We're going up. F prime is going up. And then from 3 to 5. Because that's where f prime is increasing. If f prime is increasing, it's concave up. Suppose that f of 1 equals 0. Draw a sketch that shows the general shape of the graph of the function between 0 and 2. So f of 1 is 0. And we want to know what's happening between 0 and 2. I'm looking at my f prime graph, and whatever's happening, there's something's happening between 0 and 1, something else is happening between 1 and 2. I think those are like different intervals. I think I want to figure out what's happening between 0 and 1, and what's happening between 1 and 2. Something happens at x equals 2. So let's figure out its first derivative and its second derivative on those intervals. So from 0 to 1, and I'm just thinking positive and negative here. From 0 to 1, what's f prime, positive or negative? Remember, this is the graph of f prime. From 0 to 1, this graph is below the axis, so f prime is negative. I mean, it's increasing, but it's negative. Let's see, let's stay with the f prime and do 1 to 2. So how about 1 to 2? Also negative. This is the graph of f prime. The graph is negative, so f prime is negative. Second derivative. But I'm looking at the graph of f prime, not the graph of f double prime. So what I really need to think is f double prime is the slope of f prime. Right? This is like, it's kind of weird. We're separating the two. We've said that derivative means slope before. We've said that 100 times before. So I'm going to peel off one of those derivatives and let it mean slope. I'll leave the other derivative. So the slope of f prime is f double prime. So from 0 to 1, what's the slope of my graph, positive or negative? Positive. And from 1 to 2, what's the slope of f prime? F prime is the graph. What's the slope of the graph? Negative. Okay, now let's figure out what that means for f. If f prime is negative, then f is decreasing. F double prime is positive, so that means it's concave up. So from 0 to 1, I need to decrease but be concave up. From 1 to 2, f prime is negative, so I need to decrease but be concave down. So decreasing but concave up. So decreasing but bold up. Decreasing but bold up. Decreasing concave up. And then from there I need to decrease but be concave down. So I need to keep going down. So I'm headed down because I'm decreasing, but I want to be concave down, so it needs to be like something like that. Questions, comments, concerns? We're going to have a lot of practice on that coming up. There's not a whole lot of that on this test because we're just starting to put it together, but that's kind of where we're headed.